So this week we're going to look at a recap on object-oriented PHP. We're going to look at declaring a class. We're going to look at also looking at class properties, class methods. We're going to look at some inheritance, and we're going to look at access modifiers, so protecting our variables and methods inside there. So syntax to create a class is pretty straightforward. We declare a class using the class keyword, and then we give it the name of the class followed by a set of curly braces. And note that class names by convention are always given a capital letter at the start, and we have a set of curly braces, and inside the curly braces the class properties and methods go in there. And outside of the class, if I wanted to create an instance of the class, so if I wanted to create an object that uses this class as a blueprint, then I would declare obj1, say, and make it a new my class. And if we wanted to see what that looked like, then I could var dump obj1, and we could save. We could go over to the browser, refresh the browser, and we can see that we've created an object of my class that has got nothing inside it. Okay, so what about adding properties to our class? So class properties or class specific variables are used to add data to a class. They work like regular variables, except that they're bound to the object and can only be accessed through that object. The public keyword determines the visibility of the property, but we'll do more about that later. The property is named using standard variable syntax and assigned, although if we're just declaring class properties and going to set them later, we don't need to give it an initial value, but for the purposes of the demonstration here, I'm going to define a variable prop1 and say that I'm a class property. I'm just going to put a line break because that'll make it neater if we create some other objects as well. And now if we went back to our browser and refreshed again, you can see that inside the curly braces we now get a list of all the properties, and we've got prop1, which is a string that says I'm a class property. Okay, so to access that property outside though, if we commented out the var dump, let's say we wanted to echo out that property, then what we would use is we would reference the variable, the object, and then we would use the dash and the greater than sign, which is conventionally used just to either call a method or call a property of an object in PHP. That's the way it's been defined. So if I do that, if I save this now and go back to the screen, what we should get on the screen is I'm a class property. Because we can have multiple instances of a class, if the individual object is not referenced, the script will be unable to determine which object to read from. The use of the arrow is a PHP construct that accesses the contained properties of a given method. So, for example, if I created obj2 and said that that is also an instance of my class and echoed obj2 prop1, then what we should get on the screen is I'm a class property, and on the next line I'm a class property. And this is because we have set a class-wide variable here where it's saying that the value of prop1 is I'm a class property, so that's what it's going to display. So you can see that there. Okay, so if we look at maybe doing some methods inside there, one of the good things that we can do is provide what are known as getters and setters, sometimes referred to as accessors and mutators. And what these allow us to do is to change the value of prop1 through a method. So if I said public function get prop1, then from this what I would want to do is return, sorry, missed the return keyword, return this prop1. And just a note in here, we can access objects properties by referencing themselves using this keyword. So when we're working inside a method such as get prop1 here, whichever object calls this method get prop1, then this keyword refers to that object. So it's saying get prop1 of the object that called me. And also we could write a function to set it, and this would take a variable that we would say would be some new value, and all this would do, it would say that this prop1, so the variable that's called me, its prop1 property is going to be equal to new val. Okay, so going down into our code, let's just comment out that and comment out that. And what we're going to do is we're going to say obj1 set prop1. I'm going to put a string in here. So we're going to say I'm prop1 belonging to obj1. And if I go obj2 set prop1 and say I'm prop1 belonging to obj2, just correct my typo there. If I then say echo obj1 get prop1 and say echo obj2 get prop1, and notice when I'm calling a method I use the brackets at the end in the same way that as you'd call a function outside of OOP PHP. So if I save this and go back across to here and refresh, you can see I'm prop1 belonging to obj1 and I'm prop1 belonging to obj2. So this is where the real power of object-oriented programming becomes apparent. We're using multiple instances of the same class, and object-oriented programming keeps objects as separate entities, which makes for easier separation of different pieces of code into small related bundles. And obviously I can have two things that have got a prop1 that have got different values as well. Okay, so going back into our class here, PHP provides us with a number of what we call magic methods. Now these magic methods are called when certain common actions occur within objects, so perhaps when we create the object or perhaps when the object is destroyed, and at other times as well. It allows the developers to perform a useful number of tasks with relative ease. Now one of these are constructors, and constructors are called when a new instance of the class is created. So if we declared a public function construct, you can see that this has got a double underscore at the start of it, and it's a slightly different colour recognised by my IDE. This is just to show you that it's one of the magic methods. And if we say echo an instance of the class was created. So the the double underscore class double underscore returns the name of the class which it is called in. So in here it's going to return my class. It's what's known as a magic constant, and there's several of these. Okay, so if we just comment out these things here, and let's just put a line break on the end of there, just so we can see individual things going on. So when this object obj1 is created, it should call a constructor which should echo out this line here, and similarly when obj2 is created, then we should get an instance of the class my class was created as well. So if we do that, and as you can see, we've got an instance of my class was created and an instance of my class was created. Okay, a second magic method. This is called when we create an object. So there is a public function called destruct, and this is called when the object is destroyed. So usually at the end of a script. Okay, so if in here, if we just copy this line here maybe and change that to was destroyed, and let's just put an echo at the end of here, an end of script. If we save that, so we can see that destruct will be called at the end of the script, hopefully. So you can see we've got an end of script, and then after the script has got to the end, then the two objects that were created are destroyed, freeing up the memory for other operations. And obviously we wouldn't be able to reference those objects again anywhere else. Okay, so a further magic method we could look at is what would happen if we try to just simply echo obj1. Now you might expect that it would be similar to var dump, but unfortunately that's not the case. So what actually happens when we do this is we get a catchable fatal error, and it tells us that the object of class myClass could not be converted to string on line 33, which was the line that we were calling it from. So to do this, what we would have to do is we would have to define another magic method called toString. And in the toString here we could echo using the toString method, and then we could say return this get prop1. Okay, so if we go back to here, if I save, we can see that using the toString method we get IAMClass property, and then obj2 was created, we get to the end of the script, and then the two objects are destroyed. Okay, now another thing that we can do is if we want to, instead of using the destructor, we can use the unset. So if I wanted to unset obj1, I'm just going to add a line break here. Unset will just is, as I say, is an alternative to the destruct method, so we should only get the destruct method destruct thing appearing once. Okay, well actually it's the destructor has been called because when we unset it, the destruct function is called because that's effectively destroying the object. So here we're manually destroying obj1, and here we are leaving it up to the PHP script as to when our object is destroyed. Okay, so one of the things that we're going to look at is extending a class. Now this is called inheritance in OO programming, and it allows us to inherit in another class from a previous class that we've defined. So if I created another class that inherits from my class. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use class my other class. Now if I use the extends keyword and say my class, then what we can do is we've got a new class, but all of the properties that exist within my class that are public will be available to my other class. Let's see in here, let's create a public function, a new method, and new method is just simply going to echo from a new method in, let's see which class that actually gets called from. Okay, and just to make things cleaner, I'm just going to comment all that stuff there, and I'm getting an error here, which is because I've not put a dot in there. Okay, so if we were to say here now, create a new object of type my other class, so I could say new equals new my other class. If I then said echo new obj new method, that would be perfectly reasonable. But what I can also do is new obj get prop 1. Okay, so we're saying call new method, which is defined within my other class, and then get prop 1. So what we're hoping is that if inheritance is working and my other class is indeed extending my class, then when we create new method, new object rather, that it would inherit this property here. Okay, so let's switch over to the browser, refresh the page. So look, it's interesting to see that the constructor for my class was called because an instance of the class my class was created. And then we are able to call a new method in my other class. Now remember that this class here, this magic constant, returns the name of the class from which it was called within. So this is within my other class, so it calls my other class to put it in to the string there. And then prop 1 from new obj is I'm a class property, and then when we get to the end of the script, the class was destroyed. Okay, now what we can't do in this instance would be then to say obj1 is a new my class and try and echo obj1 new method. And this is one of the properties of inheritance within many versions of OOP. You can see that we get a fatal error, undefined method, my class new method, and that's because a parent class has no knowledge of its children, which may make you chuckle a little bit, I suppose, but a parent has no knowledge of its children, but a child class knows everything there is to know about its parents. So you can only inherit down the line. Okay, so what about changing the behavior? because obviously this constructor here was run when we created a new instance of my class. So what about if we wanted to override that behavior? Well, simply what we'd do in this class here would be to declare with the same name public function construct, and then we could add a new constructor in was used to create this instance. Okay, so what this should do now is when we create this, it should only call this constructor. So let's see whether that happens. Oh, let's fix that error as well. So let's just comment those out there. I'll just make a note that says will produce an error. Okay, so what we're expecting to happen is now that the constructor that was previously called, so this here, will be overridden by the new one. So let's see what happens. And indeed you can see there that the new constructor was called. Now in some cases it's useful to be able to actually call the parent constructor as well, and we can do this by using the keyword parent and the scope resolution operator, which allows us to call methods from another class, and then we can go construct. So what we should get here is when we come into here, it'll call the parent constructor from my class, so it should say an instance of class my class has been initiated, and then it'll run that constructor. So let's see. So first of all, the old constructor was run, then the new constructor was the overridden constructor was run, then we call the new method, and then we've got I'm a class property and an instance of the class was destroyed. Okay, so moving on. For added control over objects and methods and properties, we use visibility. This is also known as the access modifier, and is public, private and protected. And so far we have used the public properties, and this means public means that they can be accessed from anywhere, both within the class and externally. So we can access them anywhere. So anywhere I've got an object of this type, I can call the new method. Anywhere where I've got an object of type my class, I can refer directly to prop1. Now sometimes this is not desirable, and it's good OOP practice to stop this and ensure that only the object can directly access its properties and this is called encapsulation, and it's one of the most important concepts in OOP. When a property is declared as protected, it can only be accessed within the class itself or in descendant classes, i.e. classes that extend the class containing the protected method. Okay, so let's change the access modifier of the get property. Okay, so I'm going to change this from public to protected. And what this will mean, again, I'm just going to comment out this stuff here so we can see what's going on. So what this is going to mean is if I've got new, in fact, let's uncomment that, and if I tried to echo new obj get prop1 here, then I'm going to generate an error. Okay, now this is because getProp1 is protected, and it means that that method can only be called from inside the class. So here we're outside the class. So what I would have to do is I would have to do public function, and let's just call it call protected getProp. So in here what I can do is I can then go return this, remember, which refers to the object that is calling the method, and getProp1. Now if in here, if I say call protected getProp, this is going to then call this function. This function sits inside my other class. My other class extends my class, and we said that a protected method could only be called from inside the class itself or by a class that inherits from it. So in this instance here, what we should get is we should do away with the error. Now you can see that I'm a class property is called. Just to reiterate over that, it's because this method here sits inside of my other class. So call protected here is inside my other class, and this can only be called from inside the class because it's a protected function up here. Okay, so that deals with protected. It's quite usual for us to make variables like this private, and then that means that only the getters and setters are allowed to access them. So it means that even if a new class extends the class that defines a private property, that property or method will not be available at all within the child class. So I'm just going to make this public again for purposes of the demonstration, and in fact I'm going to make it so that this is private, not public. Okay, so it's private to this class. So if we at the bottom now, in here, again, try to, in the first instance, let's just comment that out and allow us to do that. So we're trying to get prop1, so let's see what happens. We've got a fatal error. Call to private method my class get prop1 from context, whatever it is, in line 62. And that's because we've got an object of type my other class, and get prop1 is a private method. Okay. So what we're saying is that this is now private to this class. Now if we made this public again, which would be the most used way for these getters and setters, is to have them that. If we then now run that again, then we're allowed to access it, and that's because the method that is trying to actually access prop1 is public. Oops, is public, and prop1 is private to this class here. It exists within it, so it is allowed. This method is allowed to return the value. Okay, so nearly at the end of this demonstration. There's a further access modifier, and it's called static. And a property or method that is declared static can be accessed without creating an instance of the class. So we don't have to create an object of the class for us to be able to use it. You simply supply the class name, the scope resolution operator, and the property or the method name. One of the major benefits of using static properties is that they keep their stored values for the duration of the script. So to demonstrate this, a static property called count and a static method called +1 are going to be added to my class. A do while loop will then output the incremented value of count as long as the value is less than 10. Okay, so I'm going to, at the top of the class here, I'm going to make a public static count, and I'm going to set that equal to 0. And then further down, I'm going to declare a public static function called +1. And what +1 is going to do is return the count is. Then we're going to pre-increment, and we're going to call self, which is this class, and then we're going to get the variable count, and then we're just going to add in a line break so each number goes on its line. Okay, so in fact I'm going to make this private up here as well, to make it private to the class. It'll be accessible because of this here, and in fact no, let's leave it public for the purposes of this demonstration here. If I then at the bottom now, just going to comment out that stuff there so we can see clearly what's going on. If we do a do while function, okay, so if we start a do, and what we're going to do is echo my class +1. Okay, so we've not got an object of type class of type my class, but we have got a static function called +1, so this construct here allows us to call +1, and what we're going to say is while my class count is less than 10. Okay, so we're going to do this while the count is less than 10, and don't forget that +1 is incrementing count. Obviously it'd be bad if we weren't, because then we would have an infinite loop and our program would run for forever. Okay, so if I do that now, we can see that the count is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Once it gets to 10, while the count is less than 10, so it includes that, and that's because of the pre-increment up here that we're getting the value of 10. If you remember, we started with a value of 0 and it hasn't printed that, so we're pre-incrementing, so we're increasing the value of count and then returning it. So in here, when it gets to 10, it does the +1, which makes it 10. And then obviously when we get to here and count is 10, it jumps out and it goes to the end of the script. Okay, so just a kind of a recap on what we've done. We have looked at public and private properties and how we can use something called encapsulation. We have looked at magic methods. So we looked at the construct, which is called when an object is created, and we've called destruct, which is called when the object is destroyed, and toString, which allows us to output properties from the object that calls it. We looked at the this keyword, which refers to the object that has called the method. We've also looked at getters and setters, which need to be provided if we want to allow people to access the value of that there. We've also looked at inheritance, so we looked at extending another class, and we looked at how we could override the functions that are in there by declaring a function of the same name, and how we can actually call the parent function just by using the keyword parent, the scope resolution operator, and the name of the class. We had a look at protected functions and how we could call protected functions, and then finally we looked at a do while loop with static variables. So hopefully that's been useful for you. If you've got any questions, then get in touch with me.